Number one, this thing called negative self-assessment. Where in the world does that come from? We're going to tie these 7 principles together in just a moment. Hang in there. But when you think of yourself as not being worthy, or you think that you are not deserving, or you think that other people don't like you, where does that self-assessment come from? Now, most people say, well, that's the way I've been treated from the earliest memories in my life. People have treated me as if I'm not worthy, like I'm not deserving, I'm not likable, so that must be the way I am. Now, hang on just a second here. So what you're saying is that if you were left as an infant, kind of like Tarzan, left in a jungle where you had no human interaction whatsoever, so nobody would treat you as being unworthy, nobody would treat you as being undeserving, nobody would say that you're unlikable or treat you like you're unlikable, then you wouldn't have that self-assessment. That's what we're saying when we say that. So is that really self-assessment? No, it's not. What that is that is internalized assessment from other people. So that is not our assessment, that's their assessment. We just agreed with them. It's vicarious. So we need to understand that our negative self-assessment does not originate with us. It came from other people. So therefore, it may not be accurate because other people, just by human nature, negatively assess other people. They don't even try to be honest. So maybe they were dishonest during their assessment with you. Some of the time they may have been correct, but not all of the time, I guarantee you. Number 2 is potential follows perception. So if you have a negative self-perception, even if it's inputted, even if it's vicarious, if you have negative self-perception, you're going to have negative potential because the way you perceive yourself precedes what you're going to do in life in every tiny little thing. If you think you can't walk, you're not even going to try, right? And just take that principle and apply it across the board. Number 3, you need to have 2 things. You need to have direction, a sense of direction where you're going, and number 2, you need to have control. Now, imagine that you go to buy a car. Used car, new car, doesn't matter. And you find a car that you really like, and it's got the right price and everything, and you make the deal with the whoever's selling it, and you get the car, and you're ready to drive home, and it doesn't have a steering wheel. And so you go back to the salesman, and you say, this car doesn't have a steering wheel. It was there earlier, but now it's gone. What happened? And the salesman said, oh, the steering wheel. Yeah, that cost an extra $1,000. Forgot to tell you. Now you're wondering what else is missing in this car, So your car or your life is kind of like a car without a steering wheel. Somebody else has the steering wheel, and therefore you seem to be stuck. You're not going anywhere. Another good analogy, maybe these new self-driving cars, you get on the interstate, they find you GPS, and down the road you go. Somebody else is in complete control. I'm not sure those things are safe. But, they're there, and that seems to be our future, but that is a good analogy of the direction that a lot of us are going in because we don't have control. And we also have to have direction. We need to have a sense of where we're going. I mean, you don't have to. You can go out and drive around in circles if you want, but you're not going to get anywhere worth anything unless it's by accident. Number 3 is, okay, how do you change that? Well, you need to immerse yourself in the right environment. When I was a kid, particularly a teenager, if my mom perceived that I was hanging out with the wrong kids, she would say, birds of a feather flock together. Her point was that you tend to be attracted to and attracted by people who are like you. Now, that's true, but what happens is we don't go with other people because we are like them always. Sometimes we go with other people, we hang out with other people is what I'm saying, and then we become like them. It's not a mutual attraction, but after we become part of them, peer pressure, particularly as teenagers, we start picking up their vibes, their expressions, the words that they say, their facial expressions, everything about them. We become like them. So what we want to do is immerse ourselves in a social environment that is positive. That's one we want to be in. That's going the direction we want to go. And again, I'd rather be like Tarzan alone in the jungle than with the wrong people. Yeah, I like to be with people, but not a lot. I would rather hang out with nobody than with the wrong crowd. And you notice anytime a teenager gets into trouble, mom and dad always say the same thing. They fell into the wrong crowd, or they fell in with the wrong crowd. Now, the other kids in that crowd, their parents are all saying the same thing too. They all claim that their kids all fell into the wrong crowd. So everybody in the crowd uses that excuse. Maybe, maybe not. But who made the crowd a bad crowd, or the wrong crowd? It's tough for teenagers, I get that. And it's tough for kids when you are forced to go to a government-owned school. You don't get to choose who you hang out with. You're forced to hang out with some people who are bad people. But as adults, it's not so much the case. It still is, you still have to, if you got a job, you got to hang out with those people. If you are taking classes, higher education, you got to go with those people. If you're in a neighborhood, if you're committed to a home, renting or buying, you're going to be hanging out with people. You don't have a lot of control, but you got a lot more than you did when you were in school. You can choose. And also when it comes to social media, when it comes to being on the internet, you can choose who you hang out with, who influences you. And that birds of a feather thing, yeah, there's some truth to that. We tend to gravitate toward people that we like, who are like us, but we need to keep in mind that maybe that attraction, if these are bad guys, tells us something about ourself, our inner self, our self-perception, and maybe we should say, this negative self-perception that tends to make me want to hang out with people like that. Maybe that's an indicator. Maybe that's a red light on my dashboard, another driving analogy that says there's something wrong with you. You need to fix it by hanging out with the right people, being in the right environment, or if need be, no environment at all. Number 5 is this: just learn to program yourself. Easier said than done, but the default is, if you don't program yourself, someone else is going to do it for you. That's what you found out when you were growing up. You couldn't program yourself, someone else did. If you were Tarzan growing up in the jungle, who programmed you? Well, nobody. You had to program yourself. And by the way, I don't think there ever was a real Tarzan. You know that, but we're using that just as an illustration. So here's why I say that. If you're going to change, who's going to change you? Who's going to do it? If you don't do it, someone else is going to. You need to change yourself, or someone else is going to make that change for you. And when they make that change for you, most of the time they don't have your best interest in mind. They have their best interest in mind. Sometimes it's nothing more than criticism, that thing that makes you feel unworthy and not deserving and not likable, because that gives them a little bit of an ego boost. And a lot of people, narcissists, they're willing to destroy your life just so they can have a few seconds of ego stimulation. So that takes us back to the driving analogy. Steer your own car. Don't let somebody else drive you around. You don't sit in the back seat, have a chauffeur. Chauffeur take you wherever they want to. Say, well, that makes me feel rich, makes me feel out of control. I want to drive. Number 6, the default, as we said kind of a moment ago, we alluded to this, the default is others. If we don't take control, other people are going to, and a good way to explain this is to imagine you are flying an airplane. I can't fly an airplane, so I've got to imagine. But supposing you're flying an airplane, or you're flying in an airplane, and the pilot passes out. Have you ever been in an airplane alone with just you and the pilot and thought to yourself, what happens if this guy, what happens if he passes out? I'm going to have to learn how to fly. Really quick. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, by default, gravity is going to take over. So if you are not flying yourself, so to speak, again, another analogy, but if you're not flying yourself, you're going to crash. You're going to crash and burn. Gravity is going to be the default. Other people think of them as gravity. What do? They pull you down. So we began by saying, where did you get this self-assessment of being not worthy, not deserving, not likable, people pulling you down? That is what I would term, let's call it psychological gravity. That is the default. If you're not staying aloft, if you're not on the move intentionally, willfully, with your hand on the what do they call it? They don't call it a steering wheel in an airplane, but whatever it is. If you don't have your hands on that thing, you're going down. So you need to learn pretty quick how to fly. Here's an idea. Don't get in the airplane with somebody else. Learn how to fly your own. Figuratively speaking, number 7 is this. We're going to tie this all together in just a moment, but how do we stay aloft? We do that by creating habits. Now, people with autism really good at this because we absolutely positively love to have what I would call programs, routines, habits, kind of basically all the same thing. So we're really good at forming habits because it gives us a sense of security, a sense of control. We love spreadsheets and whatever. We like everything to be neat, tidy, and organized. And if not neat and tidy, at least we like things organized. We don't like surprises. Very often, we don't like surprises. That's because we're creating habits. We don't even know it. So one of the positive things about being autistic is people with autism just by their very nature tend to create habits, and that's one of the things that keeps us aloft. But one of the things that drives us down is there's a constant tugging of psychological gravity, of other people saying, you're not worth it, you're not deserving, you're not likable. And so what happens is we're flying the airplane, we have to resist that by using, I don't know much about aerodynamics, but somehow, you're propelled into the air and you use the lift, and so we need to keep moving forward. It doesn't matter if you have an airplane and it stops moving. Well, the default takes over. So you need to keep those habits in place and keep them moving. Habits that reassure you that you are worthy, and by the way, you do have worth, that you are deserving because, you're human. Everybody is deserving. And you may not be likable by some people, but there are some people who perfectly are not only like you, but they like you. Maybe not as much as people who live in the neurotypical hive mind, but you need to understand that perception of being unlikable is wholly relative to other people's opinions. So what is likable? Well, it's relative to the person who doesn't like you. That's his opinion, So too bad. He's got a bad opinion. That's how you handle that. Let's tie all this together. Now, I got this is kind of a paraphrase, but I heard a guy by the name of Peter Sage say this, and I'm not quoting exactly, but he said something to the effect that you will never rise above your self-belief or your self-perception. So however you see yourself, you can't get above that. That's as high as you go. So if you don't think you're worthy, you're going to act like you're not worthy. If you think you're not deserving, you're going to behave like you're not deserving. If you see yourself, if your self-perception is, I'm not likable, you're going to behave as if you're not likable. And guess what? Chances are that's going to make you more unlikable. And I'm not saying everybody's going to like you, because I know in my life experience that people just don't behave that way. They're just not going to like me. But so what? I've got to remind myself to stay aloft that that's their opinion. That's relative. The fact that the people who live in the hive mind have a distorted warped view of what a likable person is, I can't say that's not my problem, because it is my problem, because they made it my problem. But that doesn't make it reality. So I have to deal with it from that perspective. Click on the button below so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you all next time.